Oh, because I don't think there could be a black Simon Jordan.
Why not?
Because you're too opinionated. And if you're a black, you would get slaughtered more than you get slaughtered
Okay.
now. 100%.
Do you think?
And a female. You think you could have a black
why do you think
Boris
that?
Johnson? Because, of course, we can run, can't we? 1 second. And we can play. And we can sing, can't we? We're entertainers.
So
until we get rid of that, nothing's going to change. You don't pass the exam on the day you take it. You pass it in your preparation leading up to it.
I agree.
And in football, it's the same thing. We love Messi and Ronaldo, but what we don't see is the Monday to Friday work they put in.
This is Up Front with me, Simon Jordan. I believe there are a lot of vacuous, uninformed, unchallenged opinions out there. I want to get to the bottom line and cut through the nonsense. So with this podcast with William Hill, I'm going to get people with strong views, strong opinions, and get them to stand them up to proper scrutiny. There's a good chance I might learn something along the way. But more importantly, so might you. Joining me in today's episode, a talented winger who started his career at Watford under the late Graham Taylor before spending a decade at Liverpool, twice winning the title and an FA Cup, playing alongside some of the most revered names in football, experiencing the highest of highs and lowest of lows. He's written books and has strident views on the issues of race and class in the UK today. Mr. John Barnes, welcome to Up Front.
Always a pleasure.
John, in all of these discussions, when I'm talking to you guys, you superstars of sport, I always start from the position of wanting to understand, I suppose, for want of a better expression, what is your why? And where did you come from to go to the journey that you went on? I don't mean necessarily geographically, but I think that's part of an important part of your story. So I suppose we start with that. You know, John Barnes, where did John Barnes start from to become this footballer that we all know and recognise?
Well, when we look at anybody's journey, fate plays a big part in all our lives and all our journeys. So growing up as a young boy in Jamaica, when I was 12 years old, my father was a colonel in the Jamaican army. He got sent as military attaché to England when I was 12. So it was a 4-year posting. So I'm coming to England as a 13-year-old boy now because my father is going to be the military attaché in England for 4 years. So I'm going to come to England for 4 years. Then at 17, I'm going to go back to Jamaica. Probably go to America. Most Jamaicans go to university in America. So it was going to be a 4-year adventure. Nothing else. We didn't emigrate. We didn't come here to live. My dad was a diplomat. We lived in Golders Green, Highgate. We lived in Mayfair. We had, my dad and my mother worked in television. So I was coming for a great adventure, having always played football. So I played football growing up in Jamaica.
Right.
As a young boy, when I was 11, I played for the under-16s. I was a good footballer. I would always play football. I love football. I'm going to come to the home of football. I'm going to play football. Then I'm going to go back to Jamaica, play football in Jamaica or play football in America. I never dreamed of being a professional footballer because I didn't think my life would keep me in a country that has professional football.
Right.
And 6 months before the family, in fact, my dad went back, the family are about to go back. I'm playing locally for Sudbury Court in Wembley by Vale Farm, and a taxi driver is driving by. He decides to watch the game. He knows a scout. He tells a scout to come and watch me play. Then 3 months later, Watford said, come and train, and they offered me a contract. My mum and dad went back before the season even started, so I had to stay with some friends. And at 17, I'm now a professional footballer with Watford, whereby 1 year earlier, I never even thought about being a professional footballer. Although I knew I would always play football in whatever country I was in, I never thought I was going to be in England.
But when you look at it and you talk about the journey that you've been on to get to this space in terms of these are the basic fundamental milestones, but there's also something mentally about you guys that's different. I signed for Chelsea when I was 15. I was in the same team as Michael Thomas, who was a fabulous player. And you will know that because you played against him.
And with him.
And with
Liverpool.
him, of course, yeah. But there was something for me that wasn't there in terms of the desire to be, I was a good footballer, not like you, of course, but I had, the talent to be a footballer, to be a professional footballer, but I didn't have the real, the switch that you turn to become an elite sportsman and to become a top player.
Yeah.
And part of your background, because your background's different from, I would suspect, a lot of young footballers at the time that you came through. We're now seeing a different generation of footballer. We're seeing a media savvy footballer. We're seeing an educated footballer. When we were younger, and you're a little bit older than me, but when we were younger, most footballers were stereotyped as being thick with no education, no background, and football was only one of their outlets. You don't come from that position. You come from a different position. Your family are educated. You're educated. Your sisters and your other family are, and so are your children, obviously, because of your backgrounds.
Yeah.
But how do you equate a very different sort of background to becoming the footballer that you became?
Well, first of all, when you were there at Chelsea at 15, you were dreaming about being a professional footballer.
Yeah.
And I suppose
weren't.
from your 12 or 13. So even when I was 16, I knew I was dreaming of being a footballer because I loved football.
Right.
I didn't think I'd be a professional because if I go back to Jamaica or go to America, I got offered a scholarship to Howard University. I don't know what degree I was going to do, and I'd play football in America. This is 1980, 81. There's no professional football. So I knew I'd always play football. Yeah. But of course, you were thinking about being a professional. But from my perspective, what my dad instilled in me, my dad went to Sandhurst in the 50s with Andrew Parker Bowles. So my dad, being an army officer, spoke about discipline, determination. So from I was young, just to give an example of the way I was brought up, I used to swim. My sister swam for Jamaica. And we were very sporting as a family. And I used to swim competitively at the age 11 and 12. And we had to train every day. My dad said, if you're going to do it with authenticity, not from a professional perspective. And because I would stop off every now and again, we had to train every day. I would stop off to play football and not go to training. He said, stop swimming, unless you're going to do it with authenticity. So when I then came to England and I'm playing for Stowe Boys Club on the 13s, 14s, 15s, I had to train by myself.
Because you went to good schools though, didn't you?
I did. I went to St. Marylebone Grammar School. I went to a good school. But notwithstanding that, what my dad instilled in me, which I probably hated at the time, of this work ethic, hard work, commitment. My friends were going out. He said, you have to go and do extra training. I was running around Hyde Park when I didn't really want to. Obviously, it stood me in good stead, but that's the way I was brought up.
Because I had that. My father was a professional footballer. My father played for Palace. That's why they ended up buying that football team because of the association. And I grew up with that discipline mentality. That I remember one Christmas, I got this huge box of presents, and it was a really weighty box. And my kid brother's looking at it, and I'm going to look at the size of what I've got. I opened it up. It was weights. Yeah. Because my dad's discipline was I was going to run up and down our stairs. I was going to do weights, and I was going to do particular classes. So I was driven, but it drove things out of me. It drove the love of football out of me. The discipline that my father wanted to install in me, albeit I believe the fundamentals of life are instilled through disciplines and value sets.
Absolutely. But with me, it wasn't not football, you see. Right. The only thing that didn't work was with school. You know, my sisters are very educated. One's a lawyer, one's a banker. My mum did a law degree when she was 70. She's now a barrister at 87. So from a very educational family, that was lost on me. But in terms of discipline, in terms of I played squash, I swam, whatever I did, he says, yes, you may have talent, but you have to put the effort in. The preparation, and I say that to my kids now, you don't pass the exam on the day you take it. You pass it in your preparation leading up to it.
I agree.
And in football, it's the same thing. We love Messi and Ronaldo, but what we don't see is the Monday to Friday work they put in.
Because it isn't just ability.
Oh, of course.
It's not, because there's lots of kids that are not playing football that were probably more talented than the ones that ended up playing it.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's the most important. And Watford was a great club. Graeme Taylor.
Yeah, because I want to talk to you about that. Because, I mean, Graeme Taylor, I'm going to get into, you led me into Watford, because Graeme Taylor was someone I met. And I met Graeme Taylor when he was on his second stint, I think, at Watford. I think it was his second stint, around about 2001. Yeah, and I'd had Palace for about a year, 18 months. Yeah. And there was obviously this media incarnation that's been created around Graeme Taylor. When I met him in the manager's office. I think we'd just beaten Watford. And Graham's observation to me was they can all wait on a fucking bus because they pissed off my weekend, right? Because they played so poorly. Yeah. And then I've got Martin Keown telling me stories about Graeme Taylor when he went to Aston Villa and how Graeme said to Doug Ellis, it's wonderful you've come down to training ground, chairman. Now piss off. Yeah. We don't need you here anymore.
You say that to Elton all the time.
And then into the players, you don't want to be here. You don't want to be here. You're trying to get a move. You're trying to get a move. You lot either come with me or you can all do one. Yeah. And then you've got this other Graeme Taylor scenario of, you know, the press conference when he goes at Rob Shepherd and he says, "Oh, I can't have it, Rob. I can't have that miserable face." And then, of course, you've got the media caricature. Your relationship with Graeme Taylor and your perception of Graeme Taylor and the value that he had in your life, because it would strike me that he must have been significantly valuable to you.
Absolutely.
So tell me about it.
Graeme Taylor was an incredible man. My favourite Graeme Taylor story is it's a story that will resonate here in 2023 because, and I didn't know this story until probably about 2 years ago when Luther Blissett told me. He never reminded me. He told me. And he said he only heard this probably a year earlier. In 1981, I think it was, 82, we were playing against Oldham Athletic. And, you know, Graeme had his issues because Graeme was a particular age of the way, the language that they use. So they were talking about Graeme being racist because he said certain things. And we're playing against Oldham and halftime came and Graeme Taylor was in the dressing room at halftime. It was Sam Ellis who was the coach, and he took the halftime team talk, but we didn't think anything of it. Graeme was probably doing what he's doing.
Sam Ellis who went to work with Stan Turnant.
That's right, yeah. But then Graeme came in just before we went back out, and he gave his normal team talk and went out. Graeme never said a word where he was. No one even thought where he was. It's only when Luther told me the story 2 years ago that it made sense, because I didn't even know that he wasn't there. You know, he came in 5 minutes before the end. He gave his talk, never said a word to anyone. And what had happened, this is 1982, before there was a conversation to be had about racism, racial abuse, and football matches, as you know, back then, it was very overt in society. So therefore it went on. And what had happened in 1982, and Watford's a lovely club. Watford fans aren't aggressive.
I know it is, yeah.
Watford fans aren't aggressive to be fighting and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But of course, football fans are football fans. And what had happened was when the game was going on, they had a black player called Roger Palmer up front for Oldham Athletic. And Graeme heard one or two fans racially abusing Roger Palmer. We never heard it. And if we did, it would have been commonplace, whatever. But, Watford aren't fans like that. But of course, they're like everybody else. So what he did, which we weren't even aware of, he never said a word. What he did is when we went in at half-time, he went up and got the mic from the announcer. He went into the middle of the pitch and he said, if I hear any racist abuse at this football club, because we have 2 black players, and if I hear any racist abuse at this football club, whoever does it will never come to this stadium again. Came into the dressing room, never mentioned it. Said, right, that second half, and that shows what Graeme Taylor is like.
Yeah.
He was an incredible man.
Did you feel, I mean, obviously, as a player, he would have shaped certain aspects of your father set you on your way and gave you the culture and the outlook and the disposition and the discipline. And Graeme was the beneficiary of that to some extent because you had talent alongside it and he had a need for that in his team. Yeah. When you saw the depiction of Graeme and the ridicule and the parody that came as a result of it, and you saw, the documentaries on television where do I not like that and all that went with that, how did that make you, given the fact that he was such a pivotal influence in your life at the beginning of your football career, and given the story you just told me, he'll have an even bigger influence in your life and more value? Did that offend you, hurt you, make you want to speak out about it?
All of the above. All of the above. And I'll tell you why. Because Graeme used to say to me, and you see, because Graeme, he was a very intelligent man, very wise, but he was very naive to a certain extent because he felt that so he said to me, for example, when I played for Watford and the fans and the press used to say, oh, you're great because we're beating Arsenal, we finished second to Liverpool. Then when I played for England, they were criticising me and it was getting to me. And he said, when the press tell you when you play for Watford that you're brilliant and how great you are, I said, do you believe them? He said, if you believe them, when they tell you you're crap playing for England, you better believe them as well. So don't worry about what the press say. So then when he became England manager, and of course the press loved him at Watford, we're taking on the big boys, cup final, so they loved him.
I remember it.
But when you become England manager, it's a different kettle of fish. Now Graeme is the quintessential ultra British bulldog, die in the wool nationalist. He loves Britain. He loves Great Britain. You go through the war, you go through everything. He loves England. He's a real Englishman and he thinks everybody should be that way. And he feels when I'm now going to manage England, they're all with me. The press, should love me because we're all batting for this because we want England to do well.
That's not how it works.
That's not how it works. So it's very naive in that sense. So what he couldn't understand was why the press were against him because we should all love England. So of course, as you know, that's not the way the press works. So he was a bit naive in thinking, I'm just going to owe myself to them. I'm going to show them my full self because they're going to want us to do well. And if we're not doing well, they'll stay with us.
You'll kick it, won't they?
Exactly. So unfortunately for Graeme, he was just so open with them that eventually when they stuck the knife in, it was too late.
But we're going to talk about managements and the idea, and I can't make a case. I can't find the example. Maybe I'm going to commit myself into an observation that you're going to be able to contradict straight away. I don't know of any great players that have made great managers. I can think of Franz Beckenbauer, right? Okay, that's in Germany, right? But I can't see.
Kenny did the double.
Okay, there's an example, and that's just caught me in that particular trap. But other than that, then, okay,
Johan Cruyff.
I'll go other than that.
Johan Cruyff was a great manager.
Okay, but let's confine it to English football and say Kenny Dalglish, for the purpose of my argument, which now suits me, right? But those are the exceptions that don't prove the rule, right? Because I look at great players and I don't see many of them. I see the elite managers now are not coming from a great background. Wenger started the culture. Mourinho was the next cab off the rank. Benitez the same. And we look across the pantheon of managers that have come across recently, and none of them have been great players. And when you see great players like Teddy Sheringham,
Guardiola wasn't bad, was he?
Yeah, okay, but again, I'm talking about again, you've got me
and
twice
you know why
now.
that is? Great players don't make great managers. Bad players don't make great managers. Great managers make great managers. How many bad players have they been who are terrible managers as well? But of course, if you're a great player, they go, well, it doesn't mean you're going to be a good manager. Of course it doesn't. Just because you're a great player doesn't mean you're going to be a great manager. Now, with me, talk about first 2 managerial careers. Jamaica.
Celtic,
Jamaica first.
Okay.
13 games, never lost one game. We played Nigeria, we played El Salvador, teams better than us because my thing was from my managerial style is about the organisation. This comes from Watford. Not from, the way you think great players are. Go out and play and you need great players. I understood. And at Watford, we never had great players. So the organisation. And I knew if we had the right physical capabilities and we worked on our mentality and our attitude and our organisation, we can compete. So when we played Nigeria, El Salvador, Panama, we played these teams who were better than us. We never lost. So let's talk about Celtic first.
But why'd you go, okay, if you want to go back to Jamaica because you brought it up. Why'd you go and manage Jamaica?
Well, that's the only job I could get in 2007 after managing from 1999.
Well, we'll talk about that again in a second because I'm not sure that's right. But that's your view of things.
Well,
and
no,
I'll tell you
because
why
I didn't get a job.
right.
I didn't get a job, so that's the only job I could get.
Okay, but did you phone me? Because I was firing managers for jobs.
I didn't know you then.
Well, it doesn't matter. I didn't know you. I didn't know you. Are you telling me in the football world?
And what
did you
club
apply
were you at then? What club were you at?
Palace. Did you apply for a job at Palace? I was firing managers for fun during that period.
Yeah, but Palace. Listen,
okay.
1 second. I understand the situation. Palace were in what division then?
Championship, and then Premier League, and then Championship.
Exactly. I know the situation. Well, of course, I don't know you, but how many black managers are going to be given their Premier League job?
We'll get into that in a second.
Yeah. So I don't know you. So I don't know whether you're. Or if I knew that, I would have given you a ring.
But the football world, come on, let's have this on while we're having this discussion.
Yeah.
You know the football world, right? We're all 5 degrees of separation. We can all find one another, right? And the secrets of opportunities for jobs are not secrets, right? But when you talk about lack of opportunity as a result of having to go to manage Jamaica because there wasn't other opportunities for you, I was firing managers. And I was hiring managers. And I was hiring managers based upon who approached me. So on that basis, why didn't you approach me? I don't know you. I didn't know Trevor Francis. I didn't know Steve Bruce. I didn't know Ian Dowie. I didn't know Peter Taylor. I didn't know any of these guys.
Well, obviously they feel very comfortable approaching you because their experiences have told them
their
that they
agents
approach you, or whoever, because their experiences have told them that people like us can approach anybody.
People like us being what? White people? Okay. Well,
so tell me something. We've got a 40%. We've got a 40% black players.
Yeah.
The fact that there's less than 5%, is that because they're not good enough? And why aren't they approaching people? Why?
Well, we can analyse that statistic if you want. 40% of the black players in the Premier League, of which 50% are overseas players that go back after their contracts finish.
This is now. Let's talk about the last 10 years.
I'm talking about now.
Yeah.
I'm talking about now.
Yeah.
So in the Premier League, 40. I think
forget the Premier League. I'm talking about the whole football league.
Okay.
And there are more down below. Okay. How many black managers are there? And why do you think there are no black managers?
Do you know? And it's a really interesting question. It's one I want to get into with you.
Yeah.
Because I have views, and I know you do.
Yeah.
I've been listening to your book. The uncomfortable truth about racism, and I've been listening to it with an open mind because it's easy to go into spaces where you have an echo chamber. It's easy to find people that agree with you. It's much more difficult to have grown-up conversations with people that perhaps have different views and different experiences. And if you don't listen to other people's views, you might come out of the view saying, I still don't agree with their point of view. But I look at my experiences in football and my 10 years and the football club that I owned, and I wonder, given the nature of the football club that I owned, its multi-ethnicity as its fan base, its outlook of its owner, its owner having a black nephew and being very public about that, and its predilection to players of a certain ethnicity making it into the first team, going through its youth system, why I never had an application from a black manager. I had black managers, I had black assistant coaches in Keith Curl, and no resistance and no barrier to entry for me whatsoever. And I see that replicated in most of the other football club chairmen around the country that would have employed anybody that could manage their football team. So what you're
actually saying is that you don't think they're black managers because they're not applying for jobs. Is that what you're saying? I'm
saying I don't understand why the only argument that is advanced currently, not necessarily by you, because we haven't got to that in this conversation, about the lack of representation is discrimination, prejudice, racism, or people employing people that only look like them, and so on and so forth.
So why do you think there are no black managers then? You still haven't answered.
Well, I'll tell you why. Because I think there's an element of the community itself doesn't step up. I think there's 13% of coaches coming through that are black. I think that there's a perception, I listen to people like Jermaine Defoe making, I think, ridiculous observations that almost fall into the category of a whine-a-thon about where he thinks he's going to be given an opportunity. And I'll pick up his quote in a second and give it back to you. Because I look at it and I think to myself, I had these conversations with Chris Hughton. I look at the pyramid. I look at the fact that 35% of the professional clubs in this country have employed a black manager. I look at the fact that there's a multiple of managers within the confines of the black community that have had a multiple of jobs, whether it's Chris Hughton, whether it's Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank, whether it's Keith Alexander, whether it's Keith Curl, whether it's Darren Moore, and all of them having managed more than one football club.
Right. And that's 5 out of a 40%.
And again, we go to that. You
still haven't told me why you think that there aren't any black managers.
I have told you. 13% of coaches coming through is not enough. So what do you expect if you haven't got enough representation there? I think the community itself has a self-perpetuating feeling that there's not going to be opportunities given to them.
And why do they feel that?
But it's not for me to tell you. It's you to tell me, because you're the person that has the stronger view, because it's your life that we're talking about.
But of course you're resisting it.
No,
I'm telling you.
No, hold on. You ask me for my view.
Yeah.
Right? And then I think to myself, hang on a second, it's better to hear your view rather than me tell you my view. And we'll get to my view after I've heard yours.
Okay, put it this way. Why are they in the top division, in the top 5 or 6 clubs, not many English managers? And they're white.
Because I think that there is an institutional culture in English football of English managers that have been lazy and unprofessional and disrespectful and don't manage up very well. By the way, there's quite a few English and UK managers now in the Premier League. You've got Eddie Howe. You've had Brendan Rodgers recently. You've got David Moyes.
Right.
So the mix is now different.
Yeah, so here we are. So because there's a perception of an white English manager's capability at the very highest level. Look what's happening at Chelsea. Now, when jobs come up in the Premier League, how many Spanish, Portuguese, other managers who we've never heard of, who've done nothing, who've come in and been given opportunities? Because the perception is that they're better. And that's what it is, a perception.
Why do you think that's a perception? Why do you think it's a perception?
Because when you have managers who fail at Watford or fail at these other clubs, Spanish and Portuguese managers.
Well, Watford is not a great example, is it? Everybody fails at Watford according to the Pozzos.
In the Premier League, a lot of foreign managers come over, no one bats an eyelid. But if an English manager is given an opportunity, he's under more pressure and he'll be given less time to be successful. So let's just go back to
okay, I don't recognise that. I don't because I employed English managers. I interviewed foreign managers.
You speak to white British managers, speak to David Moyes and think what he says. You think David Moyes, Sam Allardyce, any of them will then say, and they've always said, they've been on record as saying, the top jobs aren't going to be given to British managers.
He got the top job.
Who?
Moyes.
Where?
At Manchester United.
And where is he now?
And why did that happen?
Of course. So that's like saying, there's been a black manager. You mentioned 5 black managers there.
Okay, but
because of what he did at Everton.
But we both... No. Why did his job at Manchester United expire so quickly?
Because you tell me why, and I'll tell you what I think.
I'll tell you because there's nuance in that conversation. Because anybody that followed Alex Ferguson, whoever they was going to suffer. And he was stupid enough...
he took it.
Opportunistic enough to take that first opportunity. All the bright managers went, I won't touch that.
But you give me one example of how long ago was that? Of a Scottish manager got a Man United job.
But you brought Moyes into it. We're talking about Moyes because you brought him into it.
And where's he been since? Has he got a top job since?
He's been to Sociedad. He went to Sunderland.
I'm talking, they're one of the top 5 English jobs.
No, he didn't. But then maybe the argument is that David Moyes, I'm not necessarily in this camp, and people can call him Divering Dave or whatever you want to call about him, right? I think he's a good manager. I'm not sure he's a top 5 manager. So the reasons why he's not a top 5 manager is because I'm not sure he is a top 5 manager.
So here's the thing.
And that's not a perception based upon his Scottish, English, Peruvian. It's based upon capabilities.
That's on what? Of course. But
not perceptions.
But here's the point. When you have foreign managers coming in to manage Premier League teams, and they fail, do then people say they're not good enough if they're from Spain, Germany, Portugal, whatever? But there's a perception that England managers aren't good enough. And it's okay for you to say no. You speak to any of the British managers, so they're making excuses about the black manager making excuses.
But I used to listen to that, right? And I listened to how he Redknapp that trope out about if Eddie Howe was called Eduardo Suarez, he'd be managing a top 5 side. And that to me was just nonsense. It was an atypical defence mechanism to the fact that some of the inadequacies in English coaching, some of the inadequacies in the English attitudes, and I'm an Englishman. I'm a proud Englishman that believes that we should be celebrating, building. I hate the fact that everything in this country is sold to overseas. I hate the fact that we've got all our ownership now being owned by foreign investors because they see the vision that other people don't. So I'm in that culture. I believe in that. And I will want to patronise this country with everything I believe in. But I also want the best in class.
Right, so
I'm afraid the best in class is not English managers.
Or black.
Well, it depends. If the best managers are black, then fantastic. But there shouldn't be a barrier to entry to it.
So why aren't there any then? Why don't they give the opportunity?
But you tell me.
Because, of course, we can run, can't we? 1 second. And we can play. And we can sing, can't we? We're entertainers. So can we think? And until we change that, and I'm going to get my bag there and show you the books on colonialism, imperialism, and the perception we have of a person's ability, women are the same thing. Until we get rid of that, nothing's going to change. What will happen is that when a black manager like Company all of a sudden does well, they're going to go, oh, isn't that great? Because we elevate
who's they?
Vincent Company.
No, who's they? Who's they?
Society, the establishment.
Right. Because
us as a society, all of us.
We look at this scenario as far as football's concerned, and your argument is this, insofar as I've understood it. You're good enough to be they're good enough to be the players and the singers and entertainers, but never good enough to be the impresarios. And that's because of racial bias, and that's because of the outlook of the structure of society, whether you take it back to the Magna Carta and the construct of society as a result of that, or you build it up through critical race theory, or you build it up to the construct of this country's outlook. And I agree with some of it, but then I look into sport, right? Because we can't fix society through sport.
Absolutely.
And neither should
And
we
we should
have
stop
to.
pretending that.
And neither should we
I
have
agree
to,
with you 100%.
by the way.
Absolutely.
Right?
I agree with you.
You equate the lack of opportunities that you had through managerial positions.
Not just me.
But let's just do it with you.
No.
Let's deal with you
what
first.
you're doing, and then you'll say, oh, because you failed or whatever. Forget about me, because you have. Do you think?
But let's use you as a hook.
Do you think? And I love Frank Lampard.
Yeah.
You think with Frank Lampard's record, if he was black, he would be given opportunities?
I don't think he should have been given this opportunity.
But he is.
But why was he
has
given
been.
it?
Let's talk about Celtic.
Yeah, exactly. Do you really believe, as a result of your career, that you haven't got jobs because you're black?
What would you say if I told you, and you can Google this while you're here, that I have a better win percentage than Steven Gerrard at Rangers?
I believe you, and I've looked at your record.
So why was I not given longer?
I don't know. You're going to tell me, I hope, because a 65%.
Well, I suppose I've been telling people for the last 20 years, and every time I say this, they go, well,
because
you tell
everybody, me included, goes, well, if you want to have role models in football, if we're going to make this argument, because we used to have this argument with Ian Wright about role models, some of them might want to be successful every now and again, like John Barnes. He had a chance at Celtic. And then I go and look at your record and go, well, that's not right. He got a 65% win record, and then he got this moniker of losing to Inverness Caledonian Thistle, whatever it was, and they gave the Super Califragilistic Celtic atrocious or whatever it was, right? Well, why were you given the job?
Yeah.
And then B, why were you taken out when there's a 65% win record, which is not bad, is it?
I was given the job because Kenny had faith in me.
Yeah.
Kenny had faith in me. So my 65% is not great for not great, but Steven Gerrard's 64 is great. That's why he got the Aston Villa job.
Yeah. Which I said he shouldn't have got, by the way.
But regardless of whether his experience he should have got or not, people say that that's not bad. And if you look at other people's records. But here's the thing. Black managers who are given jobs.
Yeah.
What I say about black managers, I'll never say. What I should say is that black managers should never come out and black people can't, because we have to have humility, unfortunately. Because I don't think there could be a black Simon Jordan.
Why not?
Because you're too opinionated. And if you're a black, you would get slaughtered more than you get slaughtered now. 100%.
Do you think?
And a female. You think you could have you could have a black Boris Johnson?
Why do you think that when you've got 25, 16, 17% of the cabinet made up of black and minority ethnics? You've got 7, 8, 10% of FTSE 100 companies. These are influential people that are speaking out.
These are the elite. I'm talking about the character. You can't have a female Simon Jordan because women aren't allowed to be that way. Black people aren't allowed to be that way.
Karen Brady's allowed to be this way.
Because she has lots of money. And how does she have lots of money?
No, not necessarily because no, come on now. You can't just give an answer that she had to go on a journey to be accepted. The one thing that Karen Brady could never have got was
once again, you know what we can do? And of course, and you know what? We had Obama as well. Isn't it great for black people? We had a black prime minister. You can't give individual examples and then say, oh, well, women are okay because look at Karen Brady.
Well, I can look at Lorraine Rodgers then. There was a tramway, it was great.
Okay, you can give 3 or 4.
I can go on listing successful women.
You can't. Like you just mentioned 5. Like you mentioned 5 black.
Theresa May.
Oh, right.
We can keep on talking about successful women.
Keep going.
Anita Roddick. We can keep on talking about successful women.
No, we're not successful women. I'm talking about the characters of them.
But their character was what made them successful.
So, how many have we mentioned in terms of how many white men have there been who've been successful? How many black men have there been successful of that ilk? You tell me that if Obama had the character of Donald Trump, he would have survived. Or if Rishi Sunak, forget about Rishi Sunak, like Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
So therefore, white men are given longer and given more leeway to be arrogant, to be whatever they want, and because they're go-getters, aren't they? Right. If you're black, if you're female, then you can't be that way. And this is obvious. So.
Well, it's not obvious. It's obvious to you. It doesn't feel obvious to me.
But it is not obvious because you're not affected by it.
Well, I'm as affected by someone that's arrogant or confident or assertive as the next person, but I'm not affected by arrogant and assertive and confident people.
Once again,
and I don't care if they're black, white, orange, or green.
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about society. Society would not accept.
I think I'm reflective of an element
No, you're not. Society would not accept a black Simon Jordan. 100%.
That's your
and they would not accept a black Boris Johnson.
That's your view.
You think a black Boris Johnson? Or a black Donald Trump.
I do not. To be fair, I don't think we should accept a white Boris Johnson. Quite frankly, that's a different discussion entirely.
But we do, don't we?
Well, to some extent we do. But we didn't for long, did we? But we didn't for long, did we?
Yeah, but we do.
We didn't for long.
So these are the issues. Now, what I said, I was going on to say, what we should say as black managers is that, and if you go, we couldn't be as good as white managers. Well, why? Because you think you can be like Alex Ferguson black. Well, you know what we should say? We should say we can be as bad as white managers. We can be as bad as white managers. You know what that means? When we lose our job, we get another one. Then we get another one. Then we get another one, having failed.
But you do.
Who does?
Chris Hughton. Paul Ince.
So go
on. Keith Alexander. I can pull out my pad in a second. About 7, 8 of them.
30% black, and you can name 7 and 8 out of thousands of managers over the last 20 years.
I go back to, you didn't answer my observation then.
Which is what?
why are we not got a pipeline? If the statistics that came through...
It is not a pipeline.
Well,
it is not a pipeline. Let me tell you, because you asked me about it, and I'll tell you why. Chairman, don't sack managers. You know who sacks managers? Fans. Now, why are fans quicker to lose faith in black managers than they are on white managers? White managers are going to get a sack, don't get me wrong. Of course they are. And the solution, very much like trickle-down economics doesn't work. Yeah. Trickling down, putting a black man in positions of power doesn't work either, because they have to be beholden to the fans. So, Tony Fernandez, man of colour. Who's the CEO of QPR? Les Ferdinand.
Yeah. Director of football, yeah.
And who are they giving jobs to? And I don't blame them, because they know you put a black manager in charge and you lose a few matches, the fans are going to turn against him. And why? Because of the perception of a black person's ability to
It's
lead.
an interesting perspective. Well, what do you think of Jermaine Defoe's observation? Because he put this, he said, I'm obviously making the transition, but I see people like Les, John Barnes, Andy Cole, Sol, Dwight York. If these players aren't being given the opportunity, what's the point in me going down this avenue or doing my coaching badges? Why am I wasting my time? Don't you think that's I think that's a defeatist attitude. I think that's
if
good.
Well, once again, you walk, and Jermaine Defoe is not just talking about walking in his own shoes or my shoes, because this is what has been happening historically for many years, not just in football, in life. And it's okay for you to look at that and go, oh, you should never be like that. You should be like me, because I'm bringing up, and I came from the working class, and I built myself up. When you look at it from a perspective, of a cultural perspective, for hundreds of years about black disenfranchisement, it's easy to say, oh no, that's not the way to be. That's why I empathise with him completely.
I'm not saying if he feels that, it's his right to feel it.
Absolutely.
It's sad. I don't think that you're going to affect change, if that's what you think needs to happen, by having that attitude.
So what will affect change?
By having a different attitude and being determined to overcome the barriers. We've all got barriers, right? Your barriers. You perceive your barriers to be higher.
No. I don't perceive it. Our barriers are higher.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about me personally. Now, from a black perspective, this is not recent, is it? I'm now 60, and you've had players older than me are now coming into their 80s, who've been wanting to be managers for the last 50 years. And we're going to say, give it time. We gave it time 30, 40 years ago, and now they're saying the same thing. So it's okay when it hasn't affected people for them to go, so therefore I completely empathise with
quote is the way forward?
Quote is not the way forward. No. Changing perceptions of people's capabilities are.
If you've only got a perception that's certain, and again, we had 2 black managers in the Premier League this year. Interestingly, neither one of them were English. And then what bias does that particularly lead us towards?
Of course, this is the whole point I'm making, because of course Patrick is exotic. He speaks French, he speaks in language, Vincent Company.
Because he just might have done a decent job at Nice.
No, he didn't do a great job.
No, I didn't think he did much one either.
He didn't at New York, Red Bulls, wherever. And Vincent Company did a great job at Anderlecht.
No, he didn't do a bad job.
Hang on a second, Anderlecht are going to be one of the favourites.
Hold on, because I made that argument. When Burnley put him in place, I was the first one to go, we ain't done a great job at Anderlecht. Then I looked at it and went, actually, not a bad job. And not a bad job for a championship side that needs to rebuild.
Regardless, it's very similar to when I talk about white English managers and white foreign managers. It's a similar thing. Jimmy Floyd Hasselbeck, foreign. Patrick Vieira. I'm sure Thierry could get a job as well. They're black, but there's a different perception of black people who are from Europe. And once again, it is a perception. Because when you listen to them speak, and you know what? Let's talk about Eric Cantona when he comes down and he's a philosopher. Talking about trawlers and seagulls. If Tony Adams, with his Cockney accent, said that, they go, he's a flipping idiot.
I tell you something. We'll get in that. I interviewed Tony Adams for a Palace job, and Tony Adams phoned me up and said to me, and I thought, I didn't know who it was. He phoned me up, and I thought he'd swallowed the Friedrich Nietzsche book, because he started to quote the principles of life and the values of society. And I said to him, what the fucking hell are you talking about? I said, am I talking to Tony Adams? I said, you will never be a manager, ever. Right? Not in the elite leagues, because you just don't. I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. And he turned around and said, "Hold on,
that's the Tony Adams."
Now I've got Tony Adams. Now I've got him.
But if Eric Cantona is doing it because of his French accent, because I have this conversation to my wife all the time.
Fanny too.
I say this to my wife all the time. Why? And the perception, once again, maybe not so much now because we're a multicultural society and we're the globalized world we live in. But I remember when I first came, they talk about Frenchmen are sexy. Listen to their accent, and Frenchmen are sexy. No, they're not. David Jonah happens to be sexy because of the way he looks. But what I'm saying is that we have this perception of Frenchmen and Italians had style because Italians. Once this perception holds, then it can get you a long way.
But there is some substance to that, though, isn't it? Because
Italians have style.
Well, Italians have created most of the fashion, most of the best foods in the world.
Well, there is some nuance to that. No. I'll tell you, because when you go to Italy and you go to Rome, you go to Milan, and you see Italian men, and they've got Gucci, Gucci written all over there, Versace on their hat, down their line. That's in East End of London. They're a chav. But in Italy, they've got style.
When you, I'm going to move you into Liverpool now, because that's where your career will go to another level. Now, this is a powerhouse of a football club. This is a football club that's dominated English football. And yet you go into it for 10 years where it's a football club. Prior to your arrival, for 6 years out of the 10 years, it wins the league. It dominates Europe. It dominates a lot of the cups. Yet when you come, there's a decline, not attributable to you, and we'll get into that in a second, about your relationships with managers there. But there's a decline for 10 years in Liverpool. They only win the league twice. I know there's going to be a situation around Europe because there was a ban on Europe for a period of time, but it wasn't the whole period of your time there. Does it disappoint you that you go into Liverpool, because clearly it's the biggest club in English football and the most successful club at that period of time, yet it didn't necessarily deliver you the outcomes that you might have anticipated?
It delivered me the outcomes I anticipated and more. Because don't forget, when I went to Liverpool in 1987, we won the league. We lost the cup final to Wimbledon. Next year we won the cup. We finished second to Arsenal. Next year we won the league. So the first 4 years, it gave me everything. What it couldn't give me, because we were banned from Europe, was European football, because we were banned for 5 years. Now, I knew when I signed for Liverpool...
But it never gave you another championship, did it?
After winning 2 championships and we finished second, no, it didn't. But what I'm saying is that in the first 5 years, it gave me, of course, we wanted to win 5, but in terms of the success we had. But I went to Liverpool. Peter Beardsley came as the most expensive player, knowing that we're not going to be in Europe. Now, of course, you talk about how can Liverpool attract players if they're not going to be in Europe. Back then, and the way it should be, is that you want to come and play for Liverpool, regardless of whether, as Bill Shankly said.
Was that really the case then, though? I mean, we spin that yarn now, don't we? We spin the yarn about teams that play in Europe and the fact that you don't get a Champions League, you don't get the lure. But Liverpool had such luster.
Of course. And so I'm agreeing. I said that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. But unfortunately, in modern football now, players and agents talk about we're going to go to a team that's in the Champions League. So, but back then, it didn't matter that we weren't going to be there. So obviously, for the first 5 years, I won Player of the Year twice. It was fantastic till I ruptured my Achilles tendon. I had to change the way I played. But it gave me everything I had and more. And how did that happen? If you go right back to the beginning, as a 17-year-old at Watford, being at a professional club for 3 months, now I'm in the first team. I'm playing for England 2 years later. When I played for England, I had a Jamaican passport. I didn't have a British passport for 1 year because we didn't emigrate. I was a diplomat's son.
So you'd get to choose.
I had a Jamaican passport. No, I physically still had, when I played for England for 18 months, I still had a Jamaican passport. Because they just thought, it's like Vinnie Jones playing for Wales and Tony Cascarine playing for Ireland. They didn't really check. So I had a Jamaican passport. And when we went to Russia, Czechoslovakia with England, places like that where we went on a normal plane, we didn't get our private plane, so we had to go through customs. I had to go into a different queue to the rest of the players.
With that in mind, did you feel when you played for England that you were English and that you were playing for the national side that you felt represented you?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic, because why I played for England was because England were the first ones to ask me. Now, if you look at, and of course I make fun of them all the time, John Aldridge, Ray Houghton, Jason McAteer are English. They play for the Republic of Ireland, and they do that no matter what they say, because England didn't ask them. Now, we followed those 27. And what happened to me was that obviously I then become British, although I didn't because I didn't have a British passport, but I could have played for England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. I'm now 18, 19 years old. If I got to 22, 23, you want to play in the World Cup, I'm not good enough for England, haven't asked me. Scotland come and say, do you want to play for us? I would have played for them.
Go there with
but
them,
England were the first. Now, normally it's the other way around. Someone asks you first and you decide to play for them. So because England asked me to play, I played for England. Now, when I played for the team that chose me to represent them, and I'd give 100%. And I use Stuart Pearce as an example of this. And we all know Stuart. British Bulldog, he's proud to be English. 69 England caps. I can guarantee you, and Stuart, I'm always tease him about this, and he's never publicly said this, but if he had 68 England caps and his 69th cap happens to be, we don't know how, for France against England, he would give 100%, because once he goes onto that field, whoever he represents, and that's the same way I felt. So I didn't necessarily feel English or feel the pride, because I felt the pride in my 11 teammates and the manager and the people who've chosen me and the fans who've chosen me. So I didn't have to be born in England or even be English to give 100%, as Republic of Ireland with Jack Charlton has shown with all those players. I'm the same.
I think that if you're going to do something, you represent something, in the end you're representing yourself to some extent. So what you do is you never lower your standards.
Absolutely.
You up your game and you give your very best, even if some things that you don't necessarily subscribe to. So I'm of that mindset. If I'm taking a task on, it's a task that I'm going to take on, whether it's broadcasting, writing books or owning businesses. It will be my passion. It will be my motivation. It'll be my standard that I set, and I won't drop it for anybody.
And you have players who support one club, and some of my teammates who supported Everton playing for Liverpool gave 100%, and ended up hating Everton because of the fans.
So you signed for Dalglish, who clearly you get on with because you signed for him later on in your career again at Newcastle. You have your best season in 1990 with Liverpool because you do double. But quickly after that, there's a change of management and Graeme Souness comes in. And I'm not entirely sure that that's a relationship made in heaven, from what I gather. My understanding of it, let me just tell you my understanding of it, is that Souness had a certain style and has a certain style. Graeme is, and I'll say it to Graeme and I'll say it to you about Graeme. Graeme is the president of his own fan club, right? And he'll believe that everything he has to say is right and everyone else is a pudding sometimes. And Graeme wanted to break up a culture. And I want to talk about cultures later on because I had Ray Houghton come to me as assistant manager at Palace and there's a culture that really troubled me about football that Graeme felt he needed to break up at Liverpool.
Absolutely.
That was a disposition of people behaving the wrong way and having a certain culture outside of football that wasn't right.
Arsene Wenger came and messed it up for all of football. It was quite a nice little culture.
Or made it more professional.
It was a nice culture. Well, it was a nice culture to be involved
with. Well, it depends if you're a nice culture if the guy writing the checks out to pay you.
Absolutely. Right? Made it more professional.
But Graeme said to me that when he signed to take Liverpool, when he was leaving Rangers to come to Liverpool, he was told by Peter Robertson that the only player that he'd probably like in this job is you. And Graeme felt that you let him down and didn't feel he felt that you were in your armchair. He felt you'd gone from one level of salary to another, which was quite significant, and that you were in your armchair and not the player that he thought you should have been. And he said, he also it's his Achilles tendon. And you've had spats with Souness and you had to climb down on certain things or apologise for saying certain things. When I talked to you about Souness in that period of time, because it wasn't a particularly successful time for Liverpool, it certainly wasn't a successful time for Graeme, because he comes away with the worst worst managerial record that Liverpool had for a significant period of time, and you might take some solace from that. But when I say that to you, and I talk to you about Souness and that accusation about you, but given the background that you've got, and given the fact that your father instilled in you the values of you must give your best, what's your take on that sort of observation? Is it fair? Was it fair?
Not from my perspective, it's not at all. Because if you look at what actually happened when Graeme came, and he's right, because Graeme came and he said to me, we went out together, one of the first people he met, talking about building the team around me and it's going to be great, blah, blah, blah. I then started having injuries. This is 1991. So he felt frustrated in me because I wasn't able to do the things I could do before. When I ruptured my Achilles tendon, they thought I wouldn't play football ever again. The doctor told me this, not at the time, because he doesn't want to say that to you at the time, but since I retired, he said, when you came in that operation, because when you ruptured your Achilles tendon, not only did it rupture, it shredded, which meant that when you rupture your Achilles tendon, you can't see because, you can't see.
You must have told Souness this, mustn't you?
No, but I didn't know that I wasn't playing again. They never told me this. So when I ruptured my Achilles tendon, your tendon does that.
But you'd have known how you felt physically, wouldn't you?
Of course, And then, of course, you put it back together, but because it ruptured and it frayed, they couldn't put it back together, so they had to cut it even shorter. So, of course, I'm just so happy to be back playing. I'm not noticing that I can't run. I'm just glad to be back playing. I'm now playing in midfield. So I understand Graeme's frustration because all of a sudden he's come because John Barnes is going to be the player. Now John Barnes isn't doing that because I can't do it. That's the only other reason.
And listen, I don't want to labour the point,
no,
but I'm going to make the point because he still today has the same view. And that must have been a discussion because you've had various altercations with one another during your time there. You've had various clear the airs during then, but he still, it might be because Graeme just retains the view that Graeme wants to have. But he doesn't, and again, I know you can't speak for Graeme, but if he's abreast of that information, is there no complicitness from you in the equation of disappointment for the outcome? Because on one, according to your view of things, well, this is not possible for him to have that view because it's not a fair view.
Oh, no.
Hang on, it's not a fair view, then, is it?
Okay, because
it's
possible to have that view.
It's possible to have that view if you choose to have it, because you can have whatever view you want.
Of course it is,
But the fairness of a view, then, it's not a fair view, then, is it? But then on that basis, he's being completely unreasonable, then, isn't he?
Well, if you look at, if for example, Teddy Sheringham ruptures his Achilles tendon, it's not going to affect him, is it? Because he doesn't rely on pace, or David Beckham. If Ryan Giggs does, it's going to affect Ryan Giggs. So therefore, the player that Graeme wanted me to be, I could not physically be that. But of course, I have to be in the team because we haven't got anyone else. So I'm not being the player I was. I'm not the player I was. So therefore, he's frustrated. But more importantly, if you look at the way football and the culture of football was changing then, and Graeme was right. Why I have a lot of empathy with Graeme is because Graeme was right in terms of trying to change that culture, which he was trying to do. Yeah. So, but he was doing it at a time when there's a lot of resistance towards it, even from the staff. Because Liverpool was steeped in the Bill Shankly, Bob Paisley, Kenny Dalglish tradition. As you know, we go out and we get drunk together and we all play together.
Ferguson had done it in '86 at United by getting rid of Paul McGrath and people of that nature that were very good players.
Absolutely. But Fergie had a lot of, but how long before he was successful?
4 years.
Now, Graeme wasn't given the 4 years. So therefore, Graeme was doing the right thing, but probably at the wrong time, if you like, or the way he actually went about it.
So why didn't? So are you saying that's the reasons why he didn't succeed at Liverpool? Or do you have any other reasons? Because he didn't succeed.
No, he didn't. But in terms of what the things he was instilling, in terms of the diet, the nutrition, the professional attitude, which is what Arsene Wenger did and everybody bought into, and it didn't change. Graeme was right in trying to do that.
I was going to make the point, and I can make it now because the link is there with Ray Houghton. Because obviously Ray Houghton was someone I grew up watching him in 1990 FA Cup semi-final against Palace. That we obviously came back from that 9-0 drubbing.
I knew you had to mention that. I knew you had to mention that, but that's okay.
Didn't I? 9-0 drubbing goes to the 4-3 semi-final win. And I remember watching Ray in that game, and obviously watching Ray's career. And when I bought Palace and put Alan Smith in as manager, he brought Ray Houghton in. And for the first sort of 2 or 3 months, what I did was I stood back and I watched, and I popped along to the away games on a Friday evening and kept myself in the background, but went with the management staff. And I watched for about 2 months my management team of Alan Smith and Glenn Cockrell and Ray Houghton drinking themselves to a Palookaville on a Friday evening. And then on the Saturday morning before the game, coming onto the team bus, bleary-eyed. And I'm sat there going, and I'm being told, this is how it works in football. And after about 3 or 4 months of that nonsense, and we're getting beat, and I couldn't understand, hang on a second, if the business of the week is on a Saturday, why would my management team, and players all in bed, I'm not suggesting the players are involved in it,
well,
but the players
sometimes they work until they're sneaking out.
Possibly, maybe, but not that I saw in this instance. And then I'd see my management team all bleary-eyed getting on a bus to go and play whichever team we were playing on a Saturday. And after about 3 months, I put my foot down and said, and that was in 2000, 2001. So that culture of, I think it's a lack of professionalism. I think, how can you be a supreme athlete? How can you be a competitor if you're putting yourself in a way of things that don't help you be such? You would say
this is the way you've been brought up. This is what you've seen throughout, from the 70s to the 80s up until that period, the mid 90s. I'm surprised that's 2001, but obviously in certain clubs it went. But this is what you see. So you learn from what you see, and you just do what other people did. And of course now, so I said, if I was playing now, I would be exactly like the players now. I wouldn't drink, because this is what you see. You're a 16-year-old boy. You go to a club. Everybody's going out getting drunk. That's what you do.
No,
so that's what happened. So from Graeme's perspective, he tried to change that because he went to Italy and saw a different way of doing it. Then he came back to England. So it was completely understandable. So I always say I empathize with Graeme, but from my own personal perspective, I'm thinking about, hey, am I going to play again? And I know he's frustrated because, and Liverpool's way was always about, and also you see, Liverpool's way always was about the senior players. And I thought Graeme should have understood that, because when Graeme and Kenny played and they were the main players, they were the ones who disciplined the players. They're the ones who did everything. Run them around, the coaches would say, listen, sort this out. So the senior players did. The senior players always did. They had that power. When Graeme came, a lot of the senior players left. And I brought through a lot of these young players, and they have their careers to thank for Graeme. So therefore, the senior players didn't have that power anymore, because once the Bosman rule came in, who became more important, the senior players or the young players? You needed a Robbie Fowler on a 5-year contract. So therefore, the senior players then were surplus to requirement. Me and Roshi were the only two. So, of course, then the whole Liverpool way that you learned as a young player coming in, learning from the senior players, was completely gone, because this was a new way of football coming in. So it was just a difficult time for Graeme and for Liverpool and for me. And, of course, when Houllier came in, then, that actually changed. And, just to show you about the clash of cultures, and our football has changed so much. The year I left, which is a funny story, in pre-season we used to go to Sweden, Scandinavia, play lots of games. And, of course, when you go for pre-season training, you play 5 matches in 2 weeks against little village teams, and as soon as the game's over, you're out. Gerard Houllier had said, and of course him and Roy were joint managers, and there's a story that, the players were like, well, who's in charge? So that's an issue for a few months until Roy left. But pre-season, Gerard Houllier goes, right, we're not going out now. No going out after the game. So they come in, a little village, Hampstead, just a little village. You go to the town square, and all the players then said, well, we're going to sneak out. So they put all their going out gear on. Yeah? And as soon as the lift door opens, they walked out to go out. There is Gerard Houllier and his assistant at the door now, standing at the door, looking at them like that, saying, where do you think you're going? So, of course, they stood there, and he's giving them a bollocking. They're all standing there, ready to go out. He's now saying, I told you no, I'll give them a bollocking. The lift door opens. Out comes Roy. It is going out gear, because he's going out with the lads.
He's caught in between two cultures, isn't he?
And he's gone, so he stood there as well. So this was a time, and of course, because of Wenger, that was then accepted. That is why I think Graeme was way ahead of his time in terms of what he actually wanted to do. Probably too fast and too soon, and the way he actually did it, because you know what Graeme's like, rather than bringing you bringing you along with him, rather than hitting you over the head.
I think he knows that. I'm not going to speak for him, but we're not talking about him too much.
So that it was just a time when the cross cultures of football were different. And Arsenal, a typical example. I mean, please, Tony Adams was, he donkey drinking a lot. Then all of a sudden he became like Franz Beckenbauer because of Wenger.
You and your international career, do you think, was that goal against Brazil the best moment and worst moment of your international career? Because it goes from that high.
Where people expect me to do that every week, and if I didn't, then I failed.
And then you've got being booed off against San Marino.
Yeah.
Right. When you look at your international career, 79 caps, 11 goals. How do you view it? Do you think your international career, do you think that you were a disappointment to people? Do you think you disappointed yourself?
Well,
what do you attribute all of it down to?
You know, I never disappoint myself because I give 100%. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So I never disappoint myself. I do as well as I can with the circumstances that I have been, that surrounds me. Now, what I always say, you know, who, in my opinion, and everybody has a different opinion, and we spoke about this person earlier, and this is a big reason as to why a lot of the players didn't like him as well. In my opinion, the greatest technical English player ever is Glenn Hoddle. Ever. In terms of his technical ability. I
kind of agree,
His technical ability.
Yeah.
Now, don't forget, in the 80s, English football was not about that, was it? It was about Carlton Palmer
it was
and
Charles
fighting.
Hughes, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it's fighting.
It was Charles
so
Hughes.
Therefore, himself, Chris Waddle. Yeah. So therefore, the technical players who played for England weren't as appreciated or weren't played in the right way for us to show what we can do. I would love to play now. Because, of course, that's what it's about.
That's what I was going to ask
you. So, therefore, in those circumstances, I couldn't have done any better because English football was not about that. I hardly got the ball. It was about, you know, Gary Lineker in the box scoring goals, Brian Robson, Terry Butcher at the back, Shilts in goal, fighting. We played against Morocco, and technically they were better than us. We beat them because the laws of football meant we could bully them, which is what we did.
Ask you because,
so technical players were not as appreciated. So I couldn't have done anything different.
So in this version of football that we see now, because I look at your goal scoring record and I look at you as a player and I look at the performances that you've had and the expectations of you and I look at your goals to games ratio and I think, well, given by modern standards that we've seen players that have gone on to be, I know Ronaldo went more down the centre towards the end of his career.
More importantly, they're not kicking you and they're not trying to break your leg.
So would you, in this day and age, would you have excelled even more than you did?
I would have done better for England. Yeah. Absolutely. I don't know about Liverpool, you know, because of course I played well for Liverpool. Obviously, you know, later on I didn't, but in terms of the first 5 years. But I look at players like Glenn Hoddle and said he would have been the best player here in England now. Yeah. Chris Waddle, people like that. Whereas even, you know, you could go back to Leon Brady, who was an incredible footballer. But they were playing at a time when football was so physical. Glenn became the best foreign player in France. Chris Waddle went to France. Leon Brady went to Italy. Now, for me, that's why I wanted to go to play in Italy. When I was, you know, when Luther went to AC Milan in '84, I wished it was me because that's when football, that's where all the best players were going, and it was a very technical game. Whereas for England, Liverpool always was a technical game, which is why it suited me, whereas England wasn't. So I completely empathize with the fans who said he didn't do as well for England, and I agree with them. And I said, if you want me to play the way for England that I did for Liverpool, let England play like Liverpool.
Yeah. Disappointment to you?
It's not a disappointment. Played in 2 World Cups. I did what I did. Yeah. Of course, we always want more, but I look at my career, look at the way it went, and say, whatever happens was meant to happen. So I'm not someone who will then say, if only I did better, or if I didn't represent Middle East, then I would have been great. I'm completely accepting of what happens to be in life.
Winger to winger, when you look at players today, and you look at yourself. Oh, and I was a winger, and I'd like to associate myself with you in the same conversation. Just for
right winger, you're not left-footed, are you?
I'm two-footed.
So which wing did you play on?
Left.
Okay.
When you look at wingers, and you look at them now, and you look at the quality of people like Saka and people like that, how do you compare yourself with those, or how do they compare to you?
Well, once again, this is how football has changed. Because if Saka played when I played, he'd be playing on the left to go down the line to put crosses in. But now Salah, Saka, Mane on the right. If you're left-footed, you play on the right. So he's not a winger. He comes inside to shoot with his left foot. And can't remember him going down the line and putting a cross in with his right foot for anyone to score. So wingers now are completely different. They're now inverted wingers. And if I was playing now, I would score more goals, but I wouldn't create as many because I haven't got Ian Rush, John Aldridge, Robbie Fowler, centre forward who wants me to cross the ball for them. So in fact, in many respects, the Lewandowski is probably going to be and Harry Kane are going to be the last great centre forwards because now you're going to have wide players scoring all the goals.
Haaland.
Well, yeah,
Haaland's unbelievable.
Right. But generally speaking, a lot of number 9s who scored goals, whereas now it's always going to be a wide player who scores goals. So me playing now, so I don't compare them to me at all because they're different types of players. Yeah. So even me playing now would not be the John Barnes then. They wouldn't play me on the left.
Because I grew up with wingers. I grew up watching Stevie Coppell and Peter Barnes.
And they go down and put crosses in for centre forward. But now football
and Lloyd Cunningham and people like that.
Yeah.
The Liverpool situation now, the rebuild that's required under Klopp. I'm a big Klopp fan. I think he got away with it for a couple of years, and you'll say it's because he was a white manager, but he got away with it for a couple of years.
No.
And rebuilt,
I'm not saying that it wasn't
because he didn't win, and I thought he got away with a $64 million smile because the media liked him, right? And he didn't win anything. And other managers would have got sacked, right? Whoever they were.
But the fans trusted him. You see, the fans trusted him. And that's and we said this at the
Because I
beginning.
think
As long as the fans stick with you, even if you lose all the games, the owners will stick with you.
I think
and
it's
that's what
brilliant.
happened.
And I think if Daniel Levy had him at Tottenham,
Yeah.
he would have been in a different space because he would have got Daniel Levy to do different things. He'd have got the Spurs fans alongside him, and he would have worked within the constraints of it because Liverpool didn't give him loads of money. They sold Coutinho,
and he's
right?
never done that, has he? Even wherever he's been at Dortmund, he doesn't like that. He likes a harmonious stretching, which doesn't mean we're going to spend millions on superstars.
What do you think's gone wrong this season with them?
Well, first of all, we have to address, I think, our midfield situation.
Yeah.
Because what we had high-energy midfield players, 3 Wijnaldums, 3 Hendersons, 3 Milners, that type of a player. Now we're trying to be a bit more technical, which doesn't really suit us because what we did in midfield, 3 hard-working midfield players, get the ball forward quickly. We can close down up front because the 3 midfield players could close behind us and win the ball. Now we have better technical players. Harvey Elliott, Thiago. But when we lose the ball, they can play through us. So we're going through a bit of a transitional period. We're top-heavy in terms of so many strikers we have.
Do you back him to rebuild
absolutely, absolutely.
Do you back him to be a force next season?
To be much stronger than we are, yeah, I do. But here's the situation. Here's the situation. Now, football fans, and this is where football has completely changed. And of course, you being an owner and a chairman would understand this, which is why you're probably glad not to be in football anymore, where they say just spend more money, give it big contracts, because that's what we've got to do, isn't it? We've got to spend more money and buy better players. How much has Chelsea spent and how many players have they got? And where are they? 600-700 million. And how many players have they bought?
Yeah,
so the solution isn't just to throw money at it.
But that's a different argument.
No. But no, I'm talking about Liverpool fans saying,
money.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Spend it right.
But that's what fans are saying. But spending it right, you have to be fortunate to a certain degree because the players we bought were all good players, but it hasn't worked out. So the solution isn't just to spend money, and fans aren't going to be happy if you're not winning. And if you're not winning, it's going to be, we got too many players because we spent 700 million. We're not spending enough money. So ultimately, as you know, if you lose a football match or if you're losing in matches, the fans will come up with whatever reason why that is.
Oh yeah, and listen, I used to walk through the lounges, and if the team had won, I'd be given babies to kiss and photographs are taken. If they lost, I'd be getting pelters as the owner of the football club, and it goes with the territory. You can't have an emotional business and not expect emotion.
Of course it does. But what would help is that I want you to talk about regulation, and I'll talk about a salary cap. Because, of course, if it's going to be the way that it is, all you're going to hope for is to then get a multi-millionaire owner from Saudi Arabia or whatever, and then that's what you have to do.
I'm in a salary cap
100%.
But it's coming.
100%.
It's coming in, 90%, 70% reduction.
And that's what should happen.
When you look at Pep Guardiola, and you think that, I think that there's, I hate to give it attributions of revolutions, and I do sometimes push back against Pep Guardiola.
But he's a fantastic coach.
And do you think that he has changed? I think in a high tide, all boats rise higher, right? And I think the standard of English football in the last 5 or 6 years has been dragged up kicking and screaming by Pep Guardiola's revolution and his preparedness to do whatever it takes. He wouldn't have made David De Gea go long in the next game. He'd have made him pass out from the back again until he got it right.
That's what they do. And that's what you should do. That's what you should do.
So do you think he's changed the landscape of English football? Certainly the Premier League.
Well, if you know the history of Pep Guardiola, you know the history of Rinus Michels from Ajax, which then Johan Cruyff then took that on and took it to Barcelona, and he's a student of Johan Cruyff. You can see where Pep Guardiola gets his ideas from. So Pep may have changed it. It's a little bit like when people change it from Bill Shankly, but that's where it came from. Yeah. So, but what happens is that you have to have those players to do that. And not many people do.
But you have to deploy them properly as well.
Absolutely. But first of all, you have to be able to have that quality. But 90% of teams don't have that.
But he betters them all.
Absolutely.
Conte didn't want to do any of that at Tottenham.
Absolutely.
And look what he does.
But once again,
Grealish is a different player.
Yeah, but once again, and that's why Jack Grealish, I'm so happy for him, because at Villa he came to get the ball off the back four. He went wherever he would. It'd be like Zaha. Yeah. Now Grealish is a much better player. He doesn't have as much touches. He's playing a different game. Now, but those players and the whole debate, could he do it at Crawley Town?
Yeah, I know.
Fortunately, he can't.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe Sam Allardyce could. So
but
therefore, it's horses for courses.
But it's also a different skill to manage top players.
Absolutely.
So it's a silly example to take Alex Ferguson down to Hartlepool or him down to Crawley Town.
I think Alex could do it at Hartlepool.
Do you?
Yeah,
maybe
Alex is different.
Maybe he's accepted.
Alex, I don't think could do it in the way that they do it. Well, and also in terms of the way that the game's played, I don't think Alex could play the type of football he did that Pep does.
Do you think the duopoly of Liverpool and Man City is dead, or do you think it will get reignited?
Well, I don't think it'll be a duopoly because you could add Arsenal to that equation.
Do you think they're going to go and get stronger?
I think they will. They'll grow because they're young. They'll get better. And they have a long-term vision, long-term plan. I think Liverpool do if Klopp stays, and Man City obviously do if Pep stays. But I don't think other clubs do. I think they're just, they're transient in that Chelsea will just say, let's sign more players, and Man United will sack the manager, get another manager. So they don't have a long-term plan. So I think those three clubs I don't think that any of them will do what Liverpool and Man City did 2 years ago.
Think Chelsea are going to get back in the mix? Pochettino? Likely?
Well, once again, it really depends on who is in charge at Chelsea.
Bowley will learn his lessons. He'll learn his lessons. People are quick studies.
Well, if he does, then I think Chelsea could, because they'll have that. But I think that's the only question.
John, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for being up front with me today.
Pleasure.
Up Front with me, Simon Jordan, is brought to you by William Hill. Future episodes can be found on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. 18 plus, please gamble responsibly.